Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. And I would like to echo, I'll just call him Director Glavin, said, it does take a village. There's a community of interest in bringing projects like this together. And today we're going to take you down a brief road about while the Texas Central is looking at a north-south connection, we're looking at an east-west connection. This is the I-20 Corridor Council. And as you will see, along the dotted line, we're connecting the dots for the 345-mile stretch between Marshall, Texas and Meridian. Once that has happened, that reestablishes the transcontinental connection between Los Angeles and Atlanta. Right now it's bus service, but for 345 miles, this can be a connection between the two and will eliminate bus service and put a through route all the way from Fort Worth to Atlanta and ultimately New York City. So, and here's the throughput route. You can see after it gets to Atlanta, we're going to D.C. and then into New York. So this has been a coalition of communities along the route. Some 42 counties and parishes across Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi have combined their efforts to register their support of this project so that they could then encourage their respective federal and state officials to work in tandem and to work together to make this happen. There's more safety in numbers than it is being the proverbial lone wolf. This didn't start from Washington, and it didn't start from Austin. It started from over in East Texas. This is a bottoms-up approach, okay? And these are some of the constituent members that we enlisted their support early on. The East Texas Council of Governments, the North Louisiana Council of Governments, the North Central Texas Council of Governments, DART, the Mississippi Southern Rail Connection, and then also the Ouachita Council of Governments over in eastern Louisiana. All of these signed memorandum of understanding say we will all work together in order to make this coalition possible, and again to bring our respective state and federal people together to make this a reality. I'm truly preaching to the choir here. You know about job creation, you know about economic development, about how you boost tourism, the savings for the environment and fuel studies that freight brings and passenger rail can bring. You've heard the presentation from the Texas Central, 14,000 vehicles a day taken off the highway between Dallas and Houston. That's a significant number. And I think he said 100,000 vehicles per day. That's a 17% reduction in traffic along that route. And think about this. That route has been 2 lanes. It's been 2 lanes for 60 years, just like I-20. Texas population was 9.6 million people in 1960. Today, it's 28 million. It's grown by a function of 3. And we've still got the same 2 north-south lanes on 45 and the same 2 east-west lanes on I-20. And we're just now completing adding a 3rd lane to I-35. I'll submit to you that's already obsolete. You know, it should have been 2 more at least. But if we don't explore alternatives, like Commissioner Austin was saying, we've got to look at what some of these alternatives are. Because as you see that route, those 4 lanes up there, that's not I-20. Again, I-20 still got 2. So if we're not going to have an infrastructure program in Washington, and I hear about $1 trillion, but I don't see any tangible evidence that they're looking at actually widening the capacity on I-20, then we're going to have to do something else. And this is an alternative. Because sitting for another 50 years and waiting for someone else to do something about our problem, that's not an acceptable alternative. So we reached out to our friends over in Mississippi in the Southern Rail Commission and secured a memorandum of understanding with them saying they would help. And curiously enough, their Governor Bryant and their two senators, Wicker and Cochran, are on board, as is the governor of Louisiana. And we also understand that Governor Abbott is also very much interested in this. So throughout this, a parallel strategy, and again, a bottoms-up strategy between these three states, working together to build a sustainable coalition going forward. These are examples of how we were attempting to bring, and did in fact bring, other constituent councils of government to the table representing their respective constituencies. Again, starting with Michael Morris and Mike Eastman over in North Central Texas, DART, East Texas Council of Governments, Northwest Louisiana, and the Ouachita Council of Governments, all each agreements in order to be able to pledge their support with respect to this project. We were able to enlist some of you may not know this, but they're casinos in Bossier City, Louisiana. That might come as a surprise to many of you. But they are prompt to tell you that 65% of their traffic comes from the Metroplex. Okay, a lot more goes east than goes north to Oklahoma City. And again, I know that probably none of you have had personal experiences over there, but maybe you've had some friends that went over to northern Louisiana. Okay, so we took some of the gaming boat individuals on a trip. That's the Bossier City mayor up there. And they, along with members of the Southern Rail Commission, have said that this is a good idea you've got going here. We want to be a part of it. And so they are. They're party signatory with it, as you will see from the resolution of the Southern Rail Commission saying, yeah, let's get this thing going. Because they're working on a route actually it's the southern coastal route from New Orleans over to Orlando, which was destroyed in Katrina in 2005, but they're also helping us work on the northern route because both of those were important to Mississippi, Alabama, one across the south and one across the northern part of the state. So, as we're looking, Peter, you can take credit for this. In January 15, Martin Murphy was here, and I suggested to him that what we needed to do was to take and classify this as a long-distance train. Now, the beauty of a long-distance train is if it's over 750 miles, it does not require a state operating subsidy. It can go into Amtrak's bottom line at the corporate level. So originally we were told it was going to cost Texas and Louisiana $2 million apiece every year for this. And with the current climate down in Austin, we didn't think that would be very competitive. And so when I suggested to Mr. Murphy that they undertake this study, it took them 6 months to come back and say, you know, we can operate this. Amtrak actually makes money on this route. We don't need an annual operating subsidy. And that was the first bit of good news. So that was the light at the end of the tunnel, and it wasn't a train. At least it wasn't the front end of the train. It may have been the caboose going back. So that became a very critical portion of our equation. And then it became necessary for us to look at the dynamics of this and then trying to sell this to other constituencies in Texas. So this would be 2 round trips a day between Fort Worth and Atlanta, again continuing on north. And again, at no annual operating subsidy for any of the 3 states involved. So we took the show on the road. This was in September of 15 with Mr. Murphy, and then we went over to Shreveport, met with elected officials from all across northern Louisiana, and then to Texas. Senator Hutchison, Judge Clay Jenkins, Mayor Mike Rawlins also joined us for that meeting, Mayor Betsy Price over in Fort Worth, very enthusiastic about it. All of them were very enthusiastic about the program and said, what can we do to help? I said, stand by, we're getting ready to get this capacity study done. So with that, we began looking at trying to coordinate a Gulf Coast inspection train, which ultimately ran. This was in February of 2016. And the Carter Council, we were actually scheduled for an inspection train as well to meet up with them in Meridian, Mississippi. Unfortunately, the Kansas City Southern were not as cooperative as they might have been with respect to the inspection train. We still intend to work with them because they have got the trackage between Bossier and Vicksburg. So, Bossier and Meridian. So as we completed that, the Carter Council was able to, with the help of our good friend Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, get about $740,000 to do a study. And this study was to be a capacity study to see what we might have to be looking at to increase the capacity of the host carriers in order to be able to accommodate passenger without unduly interfering with the freight business. So with those funds, which were again, those were actually dedicated for the section from Fort Worth over to Bossier City, we were actually able to stretch those and to use them to complete the study across the entire 3 states, not just Texas, through good management of the funds and cooperation with TxDOT. So the capacity study, it basically, we completed it in December, just this last month. And we had assistance from University of New Orleans Transportation Institute, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M through the Texas Transportation Institute. And so this was the second piece of the study. Again, the feasibility study showed no annual operating subsidy required. The feasibility study, and this is important, the feasibility study showed that there would be a need for 21 miles of siding. I'll repeat that, 21 miles of siding between Fort Worth and Meridian in order for there not to be a negative impact upon freight. Now you saw a number earlier, $1.5 million per mile for siding. Well, 21 equals 30 million at 1.5. So for $32 million, then this route, the capacity could be expanded with siding so that there would be no adverse impact upon freight movement by the Union Pacific or by KCS along this entire corridor. Now that's an important number. So just like the feasibility study showed no annual operating subsidy was going to be required, so does the capacity study show that this is a reasonable number. So what is our next step? As Dennis inquired, he said, hey, what's the next step? Well, Amtrak is going to have to sit down and enter in some heart-to-heart conversations with Union Pacific and KCS. We're working with the governors of 3 states now, as well as their senatorial people, U.S. Senate preferably, because that's probably where the majority of the funding is going to come from, and to get them on board with talking to the host carriers. It's going to have to be a considerable discussion, if you will, between the passenger people and the host carriers. But we're hoping that they will also look at the 1971 legislation, which actually says that not only will you attempt to live in peaceful coexistence, passenger and freight, but freight, your first order of business is to make sure passengers move freely, and under that legislation, actually before coal. So that will be our next step. Timetable to be determined. We anticipate that those discussions will get underway this year. And again, some of our meeting with some of our friends along the route in Louisiana. And again, this is the new president of Amtrak. My wife calls him the other Richard Anderson. So I said, well, he may have been president in Delta, but we were over here doing rail stuff before he is. But he is the main Richard Anderson now. And so we hope to get him to become involved with this and to enlist his support in making this project a reality. In the meantime, with your continued support and good efforts, we will endeavor to make this east-west connection a reality, just as Texas Central is looking at making the north-south a reality. Ours just won't go quite as fast, but it's going to be connecting about 1,500 miles between LA and Atlanta. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see if there are any questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you.